Hi, I'm Ruth Apollonia, and this is my third video. And today I'm going to be talking to you about knights, and specifically I will talk to you about their dress and their gear. I will talk to you about this idea of chivalry, which a lot of us do not really understand. We have ideas in our mind of what it means, but we don't really understand it as they understood it back then. And then also the process of becoming a knight. This is the book I used to reference all my information on knights. It is called Knights in History and Legend. It's very thick and it's got lots of really good pictures in it. One important aspect of a knight's dress is the tabard, and this is especially important in my stories because the tabards are used to distinguish the knights with whom they fight. So you have the Anconian knights, king's knights that wear hunter green. You have the Cephalian knights that wear blue. You have the Baltamian knights who wear black. Annabelle stared at the men in hunter green. Thoughts of her childhood began to swirl around. Mottled, hazy, but swimming. Why? She tried to make sense of them. She was fascinated by the color, but frozen in fear as well. So a tabard is a cloth that is worn over the chainmail, and it usually it hangs over their shoulders, and then they wear a belt around the middle. If you are familiar with the movie Braveheart, the English wear the orange tabards. So if you think of that cloth that is over them, that is orange. That is a tabard. Other important aspects of knights' wear is their chainmail. In the 13th century, plated armor did not exist. So unfortunately, Annabelle does not have her knight in shining armor because there is no shining armor in the 13th century. It hadn't been invented yet. So Nicholas and all the other knights would wear chainmail to help protect them from the weapons. Chainmail was usually made by the knight himself. That way, if it was injured, he could easily fix it. And basically, it was just little links, little pieces of metal in little circles that are twisted together, like that, basically. Of course, a knight needs a shield, and on a shield is usually the shield usually contained the coat of arms that could distinguish one knight from another and kind of see what noble family he came from. They would wear a helmet to protect their head. Swords, daggers, spears, lances, axes, other blunt objects, and even their shield could be used as a weapon because, they could hit people with it and that kind of stuff. Nicholas gestured Annabelle to get off Cinny so he could face the mountain knight on equal terms. As the knight galloped toward them, Nicholas climbed onto Cinny and faced the man. One thing that distinguished a knight from any other kind of soldier is his horse. So the horse was very important to knights. They were mounted men, basically. So when people hear the word knight, usually the first thing that comes to their mind is chivalry. So what exactly is chivalry? Most people think it is, treating the fair maiden with great respect and courtly love and all that stuff. But it's actually much, much more than that. For one thing, it has to do with being on the battlefield and being not being a coward, which means that you don't attack someone who is already injured. You give them an opportunity to get back up. You do not attack those who are weaker than you. So you wouldn't attack, for example, a peasant, a merchant, because they couldn't defend themselves against you. You have weapons and they don't. That would be seen as being cowardly. To go along with chivalry and not being a coward, knights really looked down upon archers because they would shoot their victims from far, far away. Their victims pretty much didn't have a chance. They just had arrows coming at them from nowhere. And so knights actually looked down upon archers. Conversely, at the same time, they kind of looked away when the archers would, take down other knights coming at them because they were helpful to them. But most of all, chivalry revolves around keeping your word. So if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you say you're not going to do something, then you don't do it. It's all about keeping your word. Handshake is all you need type of thing. No lawyers involved. Too bad it's not still like that, huh? People could say something and you could trust them to carry through with what they said. Wouldn't the world be so much better then? Anyway. In the 13th century, loyalty was a really big deal. Loyalty is basically what kept the feudal system going. The knights had to be loyal to their lords. The lords had to be loyal towards their dukes, towards their kings, because the king is what gave them their land. And conversely, in Anchony, a lot of the problems in Anchony are caused because of disloyalty. Basically, Sir Victorious is disloyal towards his prince and all the turmoil that results from there. So a knight was required to not only be a warrior out on the battlefield, but also to be courtly and to be mannerly when he was at court. So this would mean to have good manners, and it's quite funny in this book. It talks about like the knight's code and everything, and one thing is they had to have clean fingernails. They couldn't have dirt underneath their fingernails, and just certain ways to eat and that kind of stuff, and being polite and courteous to other people. So to become a knight was a process. First, a boy would be a page, and then he would turn into a squire, and then eventually, if he could afford it, into a knight. And I say if he can afford it because it was very expensive to become a knight, because you had to pay for the sword. Usually the sword would be passed down from father to son because they were so expensive. But you had your weapons that you had to pay for. You had your clothing, and in the 13th century, clothing was really, rather expensive because it was all made by hand. So a boy who was, if you want to say it, kind of destined to become a knight was often sent away from home at the age of like 7, 8, around the age of reason, to become a page. And they were educated. They learned to read and write. This might seem odd that at such a young age they would be sent away, but considering this is the time when girls were married at age 12, boys age 14, different times. So pages would usually help out at the banquets. They would serve their knights and the lords. They would bring them food and take away that which was already eaten. So they would serve in that area. Squires would help knights to dress and would bring them their swords, and during tournaments and that kind of stuff they would bring them lances in case their lance just busted into pieces. Oftentimes it said in this book that squires were usually sometimes basically knights, they just hadn't been knighted yet. So maybe they didn't have enough money yet, or they just hadn't gone to the process yet. At the beginning, when we first meet Nicholas, he is considered a squire because he is not knighted yet. Teachers who taught the pages how to read and write were usually monks or clergymen, and so of course at the same time they would teach them about the Catholic faith. And so of course there came the thought of, well, we're doing all this killing, all this warrior stuff, what of our souls? So oftentimes a knight, when he was basically too old to fight, a lot of knights went into the monastery and basically to repent of their sins, and to pray for themselves, pray for their souls. So one little account that was important enough to make this book by the knights was a little incident that happened in 1113, when a knight, realizing this dissidence between the warrior, being a warrior, and then, the peaceful side of Christianity, he decided to leave his knighthood behind him and to join a monastery. And he took 30 young knights with him. Well, this knight became a saint, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. He is the most famous monk, basically, of the Cistercian order, and founded different monasteries, and he is a canonized saint. So thanks for watching Tidbits of Truth from the Land of Anchony. this one on the particular subject of knights. I hope you have learned a lot. I know there is a little bit of hypocrisy between what knights were supposed to believe and do and what they actually did. But at the same time, the whole idea of chivalry, keeping your word, being loyal, having good manners, I think it's a lost art form in today's culture. So I think there is a lot that we could learn from them. They would wear a hat. In the 12th century, there was a case where a young knight left the knighthood and joined he was the most famous knight when he was no longer old enough to fight. A lot of monks went into the monastery and basically to repent of their sin. Having good manners and just, being a true man. A time when men were men. I hope you will come back and watch more videos in the future. Thanks.